Today, we're serving up Sea Spider. Our utensils of choice, the basic starting AC Loader 4 with no upgrades, no changes to that construction whatsoever, and 0 OST chip upgrades as well. This is as basic as it gets. And if you saw my Balteus video and the guide on how to handle him, either just with your own build or with the starter build, you'll know. These are some pretty fun challenges, and they can be pretty nasty, but there's going to be some unique stuff going on with Sea Spider that makes it a very different fight from how you need to handle Balteus with this build. So watch on if you want to see how that run goes and how you can try to do it yourself. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and if you like what I do, you find these challenges interesting to watch, or find my guides informative, then please, a like, a subscription, and a comment would be very much appreciated. YouTube is my full-time career, and as a small-time YouTuber, it's pretty hard to gain traction on the platform, so all the support that I can get from y'all would be very much appreciated. Thank you. So, Sea Spider, as I mentioned at the start of the video, this is a very different fight from the way that you need to approach Balteus, and it took me a lot of time to learn how to handle it. There's a similar level of you need to be aggressive here as there is with Balteus, but unlike with Balteus, where you need to stay aggressive so that you can break his shield and then get damage in while the shield is down before he regenerates it, Sea Spider is a bit more of a knockdown, drag-out, attrition brawl compared to Balteus's Battle of Attrition, because it just gets its shield back forever, and you need to be able to kill it before it kills you. Sea Spider's not like that. Sea Spider is just made of health, and it literally never stops hitting you. And if you're using a basic core like the Loader 4 starter AC, then you have very little opportunity to try to deal damage to it and also dodge its attacks. You need to be fairly close range to be effective with your rifle due to the ricochet mechanic. You need to be very close range to hit it with your sword, and your basic missile launcher is not going to be dealing a lot of damage. So we need to be in there, we need to be using our sword on cooldown, we need to be firing our rifle and our missile launcher whenever it is possible for us to do so, putting them on reload and cooldown as often as possible, and then it's just a matter of dodging. So let's talk about some of the things that you need to watch out for with Sea Spider here. And of course, if you do just want to see the actual run itself, timestamp was at the beginning of the video and is also in the description. It is at the end of the video. The things to watch out for with Sea Spider. There are a few of them. First of all, just how mobile it is. You would think, as a spider, it's not going to spend a lot of time in the air, but oh boy, you would be wrong. Sea Spider loves nothing more than to jump around the arena while pelting you with lasers and occasionally firing its massive top-mounted laser at you. And just keeping track of it, staying near it, especially when you need to be hitting it in such close range, can be quite the challenge. You also do need to watch, as I mentioned, those two different types of laser attacks that it has. The close-range, rapid-fire lasers that it will pelt you with constantly don't deal that much damage individually, but it fires them so fast and so frequently that the damage will rack up over time. And more importantly, it will also build your stagger meter and keep it built basically the entire fight. You need to get staggers so that you have as much of an opportunity to let your own stagger bar decrease as much as you need it to deal damage. Seriously, like, if you get staggered by Sea Spider, you are going to be in a very bad spot, as it is very likely that it is going to absolutely blast your face off with that top-mounted laser. Speaking of that top-mounted laser, that is the primary attack that's probably going to kill you the most in the first phase of the fight. You will, of course, get your targeting indicator, your targeting warning when it's charging up a blast to shoot at you. But unlike something like, say, Balteus' bazooka, which has a little bit more travel time as a solid missile projectile, this is a laser. And it's about as damn near close to hit scan as you can get in a game that requires you to dodge regularly. This laser comes out very, very fast. It deals a shit ton of damage, close to like a third, if not a half, of your core's HP when you're using the starter parts. And unfortunately, it's very likely that he's not going to shoot you with it once, but twice, or potentially even 3 times, depending on if that first hit landed or not. And if you get staggered by the first shot, you're using the starter AC and you weren't already at max HP, it's very likely that you're going to get staggered and get finished off by the second shot. So don't be too frustrated if that laser kills you a few times, because it will. It absolutely will. Other things to watch out for, the boss's actual just physical body can wind up causing a minimal amount of damage and a sort of partial stagger if it lands on you in any capacity when it's jumping around, so you do need to be able to dodge out of the way of that. And whenever it decides to come in for a melee attack, which are generally fairly easy to dodge by just jumping up into the air and floating like kind of in a circle around the boss, it won't really be able to track you. The actual animation startup of it going into the melee attack will cause damage to you and stagger you, even if normally being touched by its legs will not. So you can kind of find yourself in a situation where you're trying to go in for a big sword swing to deal damage, potentially even get the stagger, and you'll wind up actually taking damage and getting staggered because the boss decided to go in for the melee, which can be very, very annoying. As a result, you need to be kind of smart about when you go in for your melee attacks. If it's just jumping away from you to fire a laser attack, or it's in the middle of charging a laser attack, it can't then immediately combo into a melee, so you're pretty safe to go in for the sword swing. Just pay attention to if it's been on the ground for a little while and hasn't really been shooting you with much of anything. Maybe avoid going in for the melee attack then, because it's probably going to do the same to you, and it is bigger, so it will hurt. That's largely it for phase 1 of the fight. Just have to stay on top of the boss whenever possible, get close to it, dodge lasers, which takes very precise timing. But what about phase 2? Well, phase 2 is actually kind of my preferred phase of the fight, because the boss goes airborne, and it's not going to be hitting you with quite as many high-speed attacks, although the attacks it does fire at you will generally hit a lot harder. This also gives you the advantage of not having to worry about it trying to go into a melee attack and as such immediately staggering you if you touch it, but the melee attack that it has in phase 2 will pretty much be a one-shot if it hits you. So let's talk about the things you have to look out for here. When you get the boss down to about a third to a quarter of its HP, it will go into phase 2. It will start the phase transition by becoming undamageable, and will go through a small animation of it flying up into the air, occasionally pelting lasers at you that are very easy to dodge by just drifting to the side, before kind of transfiguring itself into this sort of combat satellite thing, kind of Hammer of Dawn looking. It's very intimidating, and it's at this point that you're able to start dealing damage to it. Once you're able to deal damage to the boss, you're going to want to be as close to it as possible whenever possible, which will require a lot of energy since it is in the air, but it'll make it much harder for the boss to target you. What you will need to watch out for is a sort of shotgun laser blast that it will start using that will deal a lot of damage. It will fire it multiple times in succession, and if it catches you off guard, it might just kill you outright, so you have to watch out for that. But the biggest two things are the previously mentioned melee attack that will just see the boss spinning through the air with a bunch of like lasers on its arms, and if it potentially catches you like a deadly dreidel, then, well, it'll dice you to bits. The other is its sort of killsat orbital strike that it will do, and this is fairly easy to avoid. As soon as you get the targeting alert that the boss is charging this up, just either hopefully try and save a little bit of energy if you are low, or if you have energy, immediately leap up into the air and start wailing on the boss. So long as you're airborne and not directly under it, so you don't get hit by the initial shot, you'll be fine. The blast will pass right underneath you. There'll be a little shockwave that goes underneath. You won't have to worry about it because you're already in the air. If for some reason you were not able to get into the air in time, get out of the way of the initial blast, and then jump to hop over the shockwave that passes through afterwards, and you should be fine. Again, this attack will nearly one-shot you, if not one-shot you, depending on what your health threshold is at that point. So absolutely do your best to avoid it, but so long as you're paying attention, you have a little bit of energy, you should be able to avoid it without too much issue. Speaking of energy, though, that's pretty much the number one biggest problem with this fight, and the thing that kind of differentiates it from Balteus. Whereas with Balteus, you can spend some time not boosting around, kind of just, like, using your normal boost, but not quick boosting everywhere. Balteus doesn't move around too much, and when it does, it's usually a big sort of scripted animation of it flying across the battlefield. The Sea Spider is moving constantly, and it's pelting you with attacks constantly, and as such, you're quick boosting constantly, either to try to catch up to it so that you can hit it in an optimal range, or so you can try to dodge the myriad lasers that it's going to be bombarding you with, whether it's the close-range lasers, the big top-mounted laser, or the laser artillery that is kind of not that big of a deal, but again, you want to be avoiding because you don't need any extra damage or stagger on you in this fight. As such, you need to be paying very, very close attention to how much energy that you have at any given time. This means paying attention to when you're actually using your melee so you don't accidentally drain yourself when you need to be able to dodge. This means staying on the ground and just boosting whenever possible so you can try and get your boost back for when you need to be able to dodge. And in phase 2, that means doing quick boosts up into the air, dealing a quick burst of damage, and then landing again while you wait for your sword to come off cooldown and your missiles, if not your rifle, to reload. making sure that you have the ability to move out of the way of these big targeted laser attacks or these big melee attacks when they come out is key. If you don't have the ability to dodge, you will get staggered because you're going to have so much stagger on you already from the little close range lasers, and you will just explode and die. So make sure that you're being careful with your energy output. And honestly, I'd say this is probably the biggest challenge when using the basic build, because you don't have great energy capacity and you don't have great energy recharge on the basic starting generator. So you're really kind of pushing it to the limit at all times just to get the juice that you need to be able to survive and deal damage. And that means that pretty much any little screw up or any miscalculation could potentially be fatal. So pay very, very close attention to this if you're trying to fight the Sea Spider with the basic starting build. If you're not fighting Sea Spider with a basic build and you're using a build of your own, a high capacity generator and or a generator that has a high energy recharge will absolutely be your friend here. I would prioritize that over pretty much anything else in the build. And if you have the option, something that will let you stay airborne more often than not, quad legs or reverse joint legs that let you jump really high, will be extremely helpful here. It'll keep you out of range of the Sea Spider's melee attacks for the most part, and it's generally easier to dodge its big laser attacks if you're in the air, because you can either just side dodge and then fall, which will throw off its targeting, or you can quickly boost up into the air, or do something else that's going to throw off its targeting that's not just gliding along on the ground, which it's pretty good at tracking. The other big issue was just the fact that, unlike Balteus, the Sea Spider is very, very durable. Sea Spider doesn't have a shield that protects it, unlike Balteus, so its natural armor plating is very, very thick. It's hard to get damage in. Your shots from your rifle will plink off at what feels like barely any range at all, and the shots that you do land that deal full damage are not going to deal much damage. The basic starting missile launcher is woefully under-equipped at this point compared to things like Songbirds or like 8 or even 10 cell missile launchers or other fancy options that you have at this point. So your damage from these two options, while needed, is not going to be as helpful as it was during Balteus. The starter energy sword or the starter plasma sword, no, pulse blade. Yes, the starter pulse blade, it is a pulse blade, does still deal decent damage. But again, like, we're at this point where the developers were really expecting you to have some decent upgrades, whether they be new parts or OS chips. So Balteus, not too bad. Sea Spider, way, way worse. I struggled with this boss far, far more than I did with Balteus. And it's unfortunate because I don't think it's nearly as fun of a fight either. Balteus has more clearly telegraphed attacks. It's a bigger combat arena. You're able to use that space more effectively. And you have its shield mechanic to play around that gives you very clear openings to get in, deal damage, and then times where you back off. With Sea Spider, you're just always on all the time, and it's just a desperate race to the finish. And it doesn't feel like there's quite as much of that tug-of-war that makes Balteus so fun to fight. Also, Sea Spider's soundtrack does not slap nearly as hard as Contact With You, which is Balteus' OST, so that certainly doesn't help either. And it's just not as fun of an arena, man. Like, yeah, there's something to be said for, like, the rundown industrial complex with the sunset in the background and, like, the coral sky and everything. Yeah, that's cool, but the battle in the rooftop rain scenario with Balteus is just so, so good, man. So, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to Sea Spider. It's not that complex of a fight. He just hits hard and he's tough, so I can definitely see why it's difficult for people to handle. But if you can stay airborne and you have some decently powerful weaponry, especially some high-power explosives that you can use midair, you'll be perfectly fine. Just dodge the melee attacks and try to keep your stagger bar as low as possible, and you should come out on top. As for my run as a challenge run, I mean, it was definitely a tough fight. It was definitely a fun fight. I'm glad that it's over. But it was not nearly as satisfying to do as the Balteus run. I'm sure it's satisfying to watch, but it was less fun for me to play. So I'm hoping that some of the other major bosses, things like, you know, simpler things like Behemoth and the Sweeper, but also things like Ibis will be more fun to do with the starter build. We'll have to see. If you have any questions about how to handle Sea Spider or what my experience was with the starter AC run, what I'm planning for the future with these runs, let me know in the comments. By all means, strike up a conversation. And if you're just struggling with anything in the game in general, let me or other people in the comments help you out, because that's how you get better at these games, man. Don't get frustrated and let yourself get filtered. But don't let anyone make fun of you or anything. If you're struggling, let people who want to help you. Tell everyone else to go screw themselves. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I will let the final run play out here for you now. All that good stuff. I will say my thanks here. Thank you all so much for watching. I do very much appreciate it. Again, if you enjoyed this video or you find my guide content useful or anything like that, please do support the channel, support the video. It means the world to me. It's the only way that I'm going to be able to keep growing on the platform, so thank you so much. With that said, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.